Article 1 of the U.S. Constitution creates the Congress. So again, the Congress is the legislative branch of our government. There are three co-equal branches. Congress is the first one mentioned in the Constitution under Article 1. It is the one that is most closely associated with the people. And as we go through this video, you're going to see that while you might know some things about Congress, it can get a little tricky remembering all the little details. All of this information is found in the Constitution. So if you were to read Article 1 of the Constitution, everything that's in this slideshow and in this video comes from that. So the people who wrote the Constitution were very detailed when they came up with what the Congress would be like. So first of all, when you hear a Congress, when you hear the word Congress, it just means a huge gathering or meeting. And the Constitution says a Congress, this big meeting, will last 2 years. So a Congress will last for 2 years, and in that 2-year time period, the people who are elected to Congress will come and they will begin to make the laws for the country. If after 2 years certain laws aren't passed, then they die. The laws die because we now have to vote for a new Congress. So a Congress lasts 2 years. Keep that in mind as we continue to learn about the legislative branch. So Congress, this big meeting, consists of the House of Representatives and the Senate together. So when we say Congress, we're referring to two groups, the House of Representatives and the Senate together. Now that may seem basic, but sometimes there will be questions where the answer is very specific. It won't be Congress, it might specifically be the House of Representatives, because there are certain things that only the House of Representatives is in charge of. Other times the answer might be Senate, because there are certain things that only the Senate is in charge of. But still other times the answer actually might be Congress, because there are things and powers and duties that both the Senate and the House together are responsible for. We'll go into more detail in a moment. So first of all, Congress makes the laws for the United States. Why does Congress make the laws for the United States? Oh yeah, Constitution. The Constitution says it's what Congress will do. So the way we divide up our Congress, remember it's two houses. And if you look at the Capitol building on the screen right here, you can see that this is a very symmetrical building. And on each side is a huge building where our Congress meets. So on one side, you'll see the Senate. The Senate is 100 members. They meet on that side of the Congress. They have their own building. So 100 members means that there are 2 from every state, no matter how big or how small that state is. So Vermont has 2 senators. California has 2 senators. Vermont is tiny in terms of population. California is giant in terms of population. But in the Senate, they're both equal. So that's a product of the Constitutional Convention. Those small states said we want to be equal with the big. So when they wrote this Constitution, they created a Senate where every state is equal, no matter how many people live there. So how many senators does Nevada have? So you might be thinking, how would I know? I've never lived in Nevada. Well, it doesn't matter whether you lived in Nevada. You know that every state has 2. So Nevada has 2. What about Wisconsin? 2. You don't even need to know the population because it doesn't matter. Every state has 2 senators. Currently, we have 50 states, so that means we have 100 senators. If we were to add a state, let's say Puerto Rico, if Puerto Rico would become a state, we would have now 102 members of the Senate. So the Senate has their own side of the building. They do their own things. They pass laws working with the House of Representatives, but there are certain things that only the Senate does. The other side of the Capitol is where the House of Representatives meets. And that is based on population. So in this side of the building, in this part of the Capitol building, California has way more representatives than Vermont does. It has way more say in what happens in the House of Representatives. All right, so California has the most reps. States like Wyoming have small population. They only have one representative. So Wyoming has hardly any say in the House of Representatives, but over in the Senate side, Wyoming is just as equal in power as California. So this diagram shows how this bicameral, meaning two houses, bicameral Congress is set up. So let's look at a slide that really talks more about the very specifics. Now, all of this information is taken from the Constitution. So if you were to read Article 1, you're going to get all this information. But I've broken it down so that it's a little bit easier. You may have to watch this video a few times or pause it and think about it as we go over it. So the legislative branch is Congress, made up of the House of Reps and the Senate. Let's just start with the Senate first. So you'll see that I've underlined the word Senate. This is all very specific to the Senate. So according to this Constitution that we have, every state gets 2 senators for a total of 100. If you're a senator, your term of office is 6 years. Hey, wait, why? Why 6 years? Because the Constitution says so. So 6-year term, and the way that we run it is every couple years, a third of the Senate is up for re-election. So Ohio may not have someone every time we have an election. It just depends on when our senators were voted in. But if I am freshly elected as a senator, I serve for 6 years. Now we also know that originally in the Constitution, state governments would decide who our senators would be. But now that we've changed the Constitution with the 17th Amendment, now senators are directly elected by the people of the state. Also, something unique about the Senate. The Vice President of the United States presides over the Senate. So it's really weird to think about. The Vice President is the Vice President of the United States, but also the President of the Senate. It's really a strange creature of the Constitution. And only when there's a tie in the Senate would the Vice President vote. Wait, why is that? Constitution says so. Also, our Constitution mentions another office of the Senate called the President Pro-Tempore. President Pro-Tempore is a constitutional office that they pick someone to be kind of an official head of the Senate only when the Vice President is not there. It is the oldest, so if I want to be the President Pro-Tempore, I have to be the oldest, meaning I have the most experience, longest serving senator in the party that is in control. So currently, right now in 2021, the Democrats are running the Senate. So the President Pro-Tempore of the Senate is a Democrat who's been there the longest. So if the Republicans were ever to take charge of the Senate, it would be the Republican senator who's been there the longest. So the Constitution mentions 2 offices. One is the Vice President. He would be she would be the President of the Senate. And the President Pro-Tempore is someone who kind of fills in when the Vice President's not there. That's more of a ceremonial job. The Vice President often will vote when there's a tie. That happens quite a bit, especially recently because our government, the people of the country is really divided, and it's a really closely divided Senate. Now, to be a senator, the qualifications for the Senate are on this page. And again, this is from the Constitution. You must be a citizen of the U.S. for the last 9 years. So I'm born here. I can be in the Senate. I can move here from Mexico, live here for the last 9 years. I'm a citizen. I can run for the Senate. What if I move here from France and I live here 3 years? Can I run for the Senate? No. Well, why not? Because the Constitution says you have to live here for the last 9 years, or at least 9 years before you run for Senate. You have to be at least 30 years old, but you can be 100. You just can't be 27. You got to be at least 30. They thought that was a good age. By the time you reach the age of 30, you probably are pretty mature. You have your life figured out. Now remember, this is written in 1787, but it's still the rule. You got to be at least 30. And of course, you have to live in the state that elects you. So I can't live in New York and be a senator for Arkansas. Okay, I have to live in that state. The Constitution also gives the Senate very specific powers. Sometimes the small acronym TAG might help you remember it. The Senate approves treaties. All right, so if the president makes a treaty with Canada, the Senate has to okay it, and only the Senate. So if there were a question like this on the test, and you say Congress, you would miss it, because not all of the Congress, the House of Representatives, have nothing to do with treaties. Only the Senate. Why? Because that's what the Constitution says. The Senate approves presidential appointments. So if the president is appointing someone to be on the Supreme Court, the Senate has to okay it, and only the Senate. Also, if there's an impeachment trial, the Senate would determine the guilt, and only the Senate. And we'll talk more about impeachment later. So all of this information comes from the Constitution, Article 1. So, just to keep this in your brain, can you be 23 years old and be a senator? The answer is no. Why? Because the Constitution says you have to be at least 30. Now, what does the Constitution say about the House of Representatives? A little more detail here. So, this one is all based on population. So, the number that each state gets in terms of representatives depends on the population of that state. Well, where does that idea even come from? The Constitution says so. So right now we have 435 total members of the House of Representatives. That number, 435, doesn't change. So if a state's population goes up a lot, it'll get more reps, but you still have to add up all the states. It will equal 435. So if a state's growing in population, it'll get more reps. If a state's losing population, it will get less reps. We'll talk more about a census in a moment. But there are some non-voting members of the House of Representatives. For example, Washington, D.C. has one non-voting delegate. They can come, they can talk, but they just can't vote. The Constitution says that if you're going to be in the House of Representatives, you have to be elected by the people of that district. You have to live in the district. So you can't live in Toledo and be a congressman from Cincinnati. You have to live in that district. Now, to determine population, that's a big deal. We have to figure out how many people live in the United States. So the Constitution requires that we take a census every 10 years. So the last census was in 2020. We'll do it again in 2030. That determines the population of your state, which would determine how many reps you get. Term of office is 2 years. The Constitution also talks about the Speaker of the House being the person who leads the House of Representatives. Qualifications for the House: you must be a citizen for the last 7 years, be at least 25 years old, and you got to live in that district. So, can I be 23 and be a congressman or a congresswoman? The answer is no, according to the Constitution. There are some very specific powers of the House of Representatives. All money bills must start in the House of Representatives, so look over that line. And if you're going to impeach someone, so if you're going to impeach a member of the Supreme Court or the president, remember, impeach does not mean kick out. It just means to accuse of a wrongdoing. Only the House of Representatives can impeach. That is a power that's specifically only the House. So on a quiz, if we ask, who impeaches, and then you say Congress, then you miss it, because it's really a very specific power of one part of Congress, the House of Representatives. Now, the total Congress, it has a very specific list of powers that you can see that I've outlined here. But the big ones would be the Congress together, the House of Representatives and the Senate together make the laws for the country. Both sides are included. Both sides deal with taxes. Both sides must be included if the country is to borrow any money. And you can look down through the list. There's some interesting things that Congress, the House and the Senate together have to work to create. They declare war. Only the Congress can declare war. Only Congress can print money. Only Congress can propose amendments to the Constitution. So you got to keep these two things separate: House, Senate, and Congress.